Get the whole story.
Well, good morning. Welcome. You're watching Morning Prime on this 12th day of January. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jesse Rogers. And as usual, we're here to inform you about the latest news making headlines, even as we begin your day, at least on an informative note. We'll take a look at what has been covered in today's daily, some of the headlines, and of course, a day after Kenya was reeling out of a blackout and hard questions were actually posed to Kenya Power and Lighting Company, who were definitely looking for answers in terms of what actually happened, because there was no spectacular wind, no hailstorm that actually brought down those towers and causing countrywide power cuts. So that story has been covered on the front page of the Standard. Perhaps let me just start with that. And there you have it, the big story of the day, the blackout and the hard questions that are being asked, where most of Kenya was groping in the dark for better part of yesterday morning, and faced with tough questions over rising power outages. Electricity bosses could not offer a satisfactory explanation after 4 pylons suddenly came tumbling down, cutting off power countrywide. And that's one of the major stories right there. And they have the Kenya Power Managing Director, Rosemary Odor, who said, as investigations continue into what caused the tower collapse, a team is hoping to have power restored by the end of the day. Well, according to reports yesterday evening, power was restored in most parts of the country. Well, those parts that were still affected, according to the engineers, they were still working on them. But that's one of the major stories right there. And get this, in 2016, that's the year when Kenya made global headlines after KenGen revealed that a 5-hour power outage was as a result of a monkey tripping a transformer at the Gitaru power substation. That's back in 2016. 5 years down the line, or 6 years down the line, in 2022, we're definitely facing tough challenges right there. And it was a hard hit to businesses which were counting heavy losses due to the power outage, especially those in the manufacturing sector, counting losses up to millions of shillings due to the power outage and the disruptions in their productivity. That story, as you've seen on the front page of the Standard, but equally a lot more has been covered. Right there on the top, let's begin there. A world first as a man gets a pig's heart in surgery. It's on page 3 of the Standard, and it's definitely a feel-good story, perhaps highlighting the steps we've taken in modern science. It's totally revolutionizing, I could put it that way. So more on the health developments on page 3 of the Standard, but equally, governors are set to square it out with Kalonzo Musyoka. More details on page 14 on how the Ukambani governors are set to meet today, perhaps in a fight for leadership right there in the region where Kalonzo Musyoka and the Wiper Party are synonymous right there. So these leaders will this morning host a meeting bringing together political leaders, professionals and clergy to discuss the region's politics and development interests. We'll definitely highlight some of those developments happening there in the eastern part of the country. But equally, AFCON is still ongoing for the sports enthusiasts. Just yesterday, I think it was Nigeria put up a sterling performance, beating Egypt 1-0, is it? And those stories, of course, covered from page 46 to 48 of the Standard, but equally on pages 8 and 9 on the national section, hate speech, it's all about the same script and different actors. Various questions are being raised on how many politicians are charged, but none is actually found guilty when it comes to hate speech allegations, where recently members of Parliament Onyonka and Cheruyot, who face investigators over the remarks they made, join Linturi and a growing list of politicians in trouble over their loose tangs. Page 8 and 9 breaks down some of the issues, perhaps in terms of reeling in hate speech. As you well know, NCIC just has powers to investigate when it comes to hate speech, knowing very well most of their functions lie with national cohesion and promoting nation building and peace and reconciliation. So when it comes to hate speech, they can only investigate. The prosecuting powers lie elsewhere, and perhaps that's one of the angles the article right here on page 8 and 9 of the Standard sort of delves into. Those are some of the stories right there, and perhaps right there on page 6 at the bottom right, we see the Senate and some of the developments that happened just yesterday have been covered on page 6. Remember, it's all to do with the coalition party's bill that was introduced through the first reading by the majority leader in the Senate, and thereafter fronted to the jailer committee to perform public participation, even as we await more deliberations and debate on this particular bill. That was quite controversial, and the sites on the Senate yesterday, they mentioned that perhaps there'd be more robust debates and we wouldn't see what we saw earlier on happen in the National Assembly in terms of the debate boiling down to arguments and throwing of water bottles and what not. So we expect a lot more developments to happen in the Senate. The Nyamira senator quoted here saying the best projection we have is 2 days sitting that include 2 sessions each. If everything goes according to the script, it should be done by close of business January 27th. So that's some of the developments we're following up on. Let's cross over to the Daily Nation and just hint at what you can expect on the front page, even as we encourage you to grab yourself a copy. And this is what's on the front page. Raila maps blue, red and green poll zones. It's all to do with the State House race, where the ODM leader Raila Odinga's strategists have mapped the country into 3 zones: strongholds, battlegrounds and weak grounds or vulnerable grounds, based on the perceived support or hostility to his presidential bid, with distinct campaign game plans to be employed in each ahead of the August 9th general election. And as you can see right there, that's the major story covered on the front page of the Standard, and the mapping right there, the blue, that's the strongholds, the battlegrounds marked green, and the weak or vulnerable grounds are marked red. More on politics right there, but equally huge losses as blackout hits the country. As I mentioned, business operators counted heavy losses yesterday following the countrywide power outage that lasted several hours, with Kenyans from various parts of the country flocking to social media to express their anger and dismay over the outage that began in the morning. Of course, KPLC did restore power in most parts of the country, but we're still waiting for the cause. They mentioned investigations will be done, and perhaps a report will be shared with public in terms of what exactly caused the power blackout in the country. A lot more also covered. Ruto cracks the whip on UDA ticket hopefuls, even as there's a big blow to Mudavadi as another member of parliament jumped ship. Those are some of the political developments covered on the Daily Nation. We'll get to discuss them a little bit later on with my panel right here in studio. Of course, the back page going big with public officials eyeing elective seats confused by contradictory quit orders. As you well know, IEBC imposed the February 9th deadline to those eyeing elective seats to resign, especially public officers. And now there's a court case where the Labour Court recently suspended that requirement. So it's a little bit confusing, especially to the public officers who don't know whether to comply to the Elections Act or not, especially since the 6-month timeline is fast approaching. So those are some of the stories we'll get to deliberate on. The Business Daily on the front page, just to highlight it briefly, 3 power failures strike Kenya in 24 hours, where there are sabotage fears as transmission cuts hit within short intervals and plunging businesses into losses. And of course, they've highlighted the business aspect in terms of the losses that were made by various businesses due to the power blackout in various parts of the country. Now, we'd like to begin with that particular story, I think, before we take a look at the international scene, where heavy losses in terms of businesses and disruption of key services were the hallmark of a major countrywide power outage for the better part of the morning, caused by collapse of towers on transmission power lines. According to Kenya Power, the blackout was occasioned by the collapse of the towers on the Kiambere-Embakasi high-voltage transmission power line. Now, power was restored after over 4 hours. Now, more questions have been left unanswered on what exactly could have caused the collapse. KTN's Daniel Kariuki opens our broadcast today with that particular story. Listen in.
Heavy voltage transmission power lines lying on the road. This is Imara Daima in Nairobi County. Never mind the high power voltage that these lines transmit, but the collapse left an extensive power outage countrywide.
Ikabidi niruka mtaro ili kopale kwa redi pale, nikavuka ngambo ile ingine. Kuangalia chuma zimeshaanguka. Nikaenda paka pale mbele pale juu. Tena nikapata huko tena 3 zimeshaanguka. Kwenda paka GM hapo. Zimeshaanguka tena. Hata mimi nikastuka, nikasema ni shetani gani?
Kwa dakika kidogo kama hajamaliza kuongea, tulikuwa na marafiki zangu pale. Tumeona machuma zimeanza kuanguka, mawaya zinazivuta, stima zimeenda kijiji.
Kuna shule iko hapo karibu. Ni Mungu tu amewaonekania, hawajaumia.
This outage leaving Kenyans with no power, forcing some of them to revert to generators. Those without generators forced to wait for the reinstallation of the collapsed towers. The blackout leaving many businesses inconvenienced.
Uliza mteja kama ako sawa kuoshwa na maji baridi, kama ako sawa kukauka mahali pengine mahali, ama baadaye stima ikikuja. Kama mteja yuko ready kufanya hivyo, una postpone tu appointment, wengine hawako ready ku postpone the appointment.
Tungependa Kenya Power ituangalia kwa hiyo cost ya electricity, iko very high, iko juu sana. Sisi watu wa biashara hizi ya hapa tunalipa sana.
Lights zikigo down, sisi watu tunaumia sana. Sawa wa KPLC, ingawaje wezo upotea for a little while, bado inatukost juu vitu kama ziwa kwa freezer zinategemea, bila hiyo hatuwezi endelea.
The power supply agency Kenya Power saying the incident happened at about 10:50 am Tuesday and were working to restore the electricity supply.
On this line we have 4 towers that collapsed, and that is what caused the interruption that we have experienced. We are working towards restoring supplies very quickly.
When one area is affected, it also triggers the blackout on the other areas. But our engineers are working around the clock.
Once our experts have done their investigations, they will come up with a report to inform all of us what would have caused the collapse.
Kenya Power would later restore power in most of the affected areas while working on restoration in some regions. In a new statement, the agency says areas that were still affected, including Garissa, Mwingi and Kitui, would have the problem resolved. Kenya Power says it was working to reinstall the earlier collapsed towers that led to the loss Tuesday. This is not the first time Kenya has experienced a nationwide outage. Last year, a section of high-voltage power line that transmit power to Nairobi from the Olkaria geothermal power plants broke down. Later in the year, a section of another transmission line, Lonyangalani Suswa, collapsed. The continuous power outage across the country, leaving Kenya Power on the spot. More questions than answers on what could have led to the collapse of such heavy power lines and the security this poses to those living near the power lines. The agency has also been put on the spot on how they will restore Kenyans' confidence by ensuring nationwide outage does not occur again. Daniel Kariuki, KTN News.
Okay, hard questions definitely being asked and pushed towards Kenya Power and Lighting Company about the on and off power outage that hit the country just yesterday. Of course, businesses suffering huge losses over the major power outage, and we'll definitely keep you informed in terms of the parts of the country that are still affected in case there are any, even as the engineers were working around the clock to restore power across the country. Let's take a look at what's happening internationally before we come back to the local developments, perhaps highlighting what has been covered on the Daily Monitor just briefly as we peruse through these international pages. So the latest from Uganda, there you have it on your screen right now. Repeated COVID boosters, not viable strategy. I think that's what it says according to WHO. More details right there, even as Uganda, of course, is pushing for more people to get vaccinated. They recently opened their schools after a 2-year break. It's proper to note the numbers of COVID right there. How ready are schools for girls who got pregnant during lockdown? A story related to the schools reopening. And of course, that particular challenge faced Kenyan schools right here in cases of teenage pregnancy. Definitely were an issue we had to deal with, and find out more on that article right there on the Daily Monitor. Global growth could slow sharply due to Omicron. That's according to the World Bank, who are worried about the huge toll the pandemic is inflicting on people and their livelihoods. Omicron, mild or severe impact on economy? Various questions being raised, even as other stories have been covered right there. Bishop asks parents to take pregnant girls to other schools. Of course, a lot to do with the schools reopening. Let's cross over to Tanzania, the Citizen. Some of the headlines emanating from the neighboring country. 4 dead, including 6 journalists, or 14 dead rather, including 6 journalists in grisly accident in Simiyu. And of course, the media fraternity is definitely mourning the death of these 6 journalists who were among the 14 people who died during that particular car accident. Unfortunate news from Tanzania right there. More on the standoff in Parliament, all to do with who will represent the Speaker who just stepped down recently. New rules clash with the Constitution. Find out more on that, even as Tanzanian man loses property to Kenyan wife in a marriage dispute. Interesting right there, where Tanzanian has lost property worth millions of shillings to his estranged Kenyan wife after failing to provide evidence of a traditional marriage, I think. More details right there on that interesting article. Tanzanian hero Rat Magawa dies aged 8. Find out why this rat was a hero. But for those who perhaps followed this story, it was well known for detecting landmines back in 2021. I think he had just retired briefly from his job and he's just passed on. Well, he's a Tanzanian hero, as you've seen. Let's cross over to yet another page, Rwanda Today. Just peruse some of the headlines covered right here. Millions more lockdown as China battles the Omicron spread right in the country, where over 1 million residents in that particular city started home confinement on Tuesday, even as they're trying to contain the spread of the latest variant. ECOWAS cuts Mali off over military coup, were effective immediately. Mali was cut off entirely from all ECOWAS institutions. That's according to the bloc, even as China detects more Omicron cases and some of the cities tighten restrictions. Schools reopen, but where are the teachers and classrooms? Find out more on that, even as we continue monitoring the state of the pandemic. Over to CNN World News. A lot happening from the US covered here. Republicans stand up for rounds after Donald Trump's attack. That's one of the stories right there. I can't see it clearly, but GOP leaders have said the senator told the truth in acknowledging that Biden won the 2020 election. Of course, a lot more developments happening around the insurrection that happened in January, around January, a couple of years back in the United States. And the highly contagious Omicron variant will find just about everybody. That's according to Fauci, who's a top health expert in the United States. Italian Catholic and Jewish leaders condemn use of Nazi flag at a church funeral, even as Taiwan suspends the F-16 fleet combat training after a jet crashes into the sea. That seems to be the latest happening around the world in terms of news and some of the featured stories on that particular page. And of course, that's on the international scene. Closer back home, as I mentioned, the front page of the Standard going big with the blackout and asking the hard questions right there. Find out more as you grab yourself a copy. The front page of the Daily Nation highlighting Raila's map in terms of his team mapping out the blue, red and green poll zones in terms of his strongholds, the battleground regions and the weak or vulnerable grounds. Those are the front stories, the top stories on the front pages of today's dailies. And perhaps you can just take a look at yet another story that has been developing in the last 24 hours. A lot of focus on politicians and perhaps the loose tongue we have witnessed in some political podiums. And just recently, Meru Senator Mithika Linturi was freed by Nakuru Magistrate Court after paying a cash bail of 2 million shillings. Chief Magistrate Edna Nyaloti, however, ordered Linturi to report to the Directorate of Criminal Investigations headquarters in Nairobi once a week. Linturi was released at a time government agencies have tightened the noose on leaders suspected to commit hate speech or uttering inflammatory remarks. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, has also directed the police to investigate Kericho Senator Aaron Cheriot as well as legislator Richard Onyonka over utterances they made. Jeff Kirui with more on that story.
Senator Franklin Mithika Linturi has been released after spending 2 days in police cells over remarks he made during DP William Ruto's mega rally in Eldoret on Saturday. Linturi tested his freedom after depositing 2 million shillings cash bail. Nakuru Chief Magistrate Edna Nyaloti dismissed prosecution's request to detain Linturi for 7 days.
The state has adequate resources to investigate the case against the respondent without limiting his right to liberty. The court also notes that prolonged pre-charge detention can result to arbitrary detention and is incompatible with the constitutionally guaranteed presumption of innocence.
She, however, ordered the Meru Senator to report to the DCI headquarters in Nairobi weekly and refrain from commenting on the case. The court also barred Linturi from contacting potential witnesses in the case.
The respondent's free speech rights are limited, that he should not make any comments on the case under investigations, he should not contact any witnesses, and he should not intimidate any of the witnesses, whether potential or imagined. The respondent should not contact any of the witnesses either through proxy or personally.
The Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, who directed investigations into Linturi's utterances, has also ordered the Inspector General of Police, Hilary Mutyambai, to investigate comments by Kitutu Chache MP Richard Onyonka, as well as Kericho Senator Aaron Cheriot. Onyonka has since presented himself at Kisii Central Police Station.
Now it looks like the DCI team here doesn't know how to handle my case, so I will wait for further instructions to decide, because you can't just get into a car and drive to Nairobi, because I was doing a program here, I had things to do. And the summons says talk about I've got 7 days to then respond.
Onyonka, who was accompanied by a battery of lawyers, was directed to present himself at the DCI headquarters in Nairobi. The two are accused of making inflammatory remarks that could incite violence.
We wish to urge both the DPP and the police officers not to be excited over what politicians say to their supporters.
Also on the DPP's radar is politician Amana Abubakar, who is alleged to have made inflammatory remarks while in Lamu. The DPP wants police reports on the above leaders within 1 week. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
Well, more details on page 8 and 9 of the Standard on that particular standoff in terms of hate speech and the utterances that have been made. Let's cross over to the Senate, just highlight what happened yesterday, where the battle for numbers is expected in the Senate after the political parties' amendment bill 2021 was officially tabled for first reading. The bill was immediately forwarded to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee that will now hold public hearings before it tables a report on its findings. A section of senators have urged their counterparts to handle the debate on the bill with decorum to avoid scenes witnessed in the National Assembly. Let's listen in.
The committee that's responsible will help us with the next special sitting. So as soon as we know that the committee is ready and have submitted a report, Mr. Speaker, we should be then able to call a special sitting.
As to the decision at the end, that is left to the House sitting in plenary or otherwise. So there should be no doubt about that.
Kenyans will be given an opportunity through public participation, not a guided, rushed public participation, but a robust, well-publicized public participation.
I hope this House will not be a conveyor belt. I hope we should, through tooth and comb, to ensure that we go through the entire amendment bill.
And the scenes we saw, Mr. Speaker, the TVs were juxtaposing violent scenes in the Kenyan parliament and violent scenes in notoriously violent parliaments of Korea, of Italy, and Somalia. It is a shame, Mr. Speaker, that we can reduce ourselves to that level.
History is there, and history shows that whenever there was a crisis in this nation, this House has always risen to the occasion.
Well, we expect a lot more debate on the floor of the House, even as they expect to finish with that particular bill as of January 29th or thereabout. And we'll definitely highlight what exactly happens. Remember, JLAC has picked up that particular bill, and we expect public participation thereafter. Okay, so those are some of the stories that have been covered equally in today's dailies. Allow me to introduce my panel, who will help me deliberate on some of these matters and more. Right next to me, Didmas Baraza, Member of Parliament, Kimilili constituency, is joining me. Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you for making time. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Asante sana. On the other side of the studio, we have Robert Mbui, who's the Member of Parliament of Kadhiani constituency. Thank you for your time. Karibu to our studios. Okay, Asante Mbui, and equally we're joined by Professor Peter Kagwanja, policy advisor and strategist. It's great to see you, Senior. Karibu.
Thank you very much.
Asante sana for your time. And perhaps let's start with the big question of the day, the blackout that sort of hit major parts of the country just yesterday morning. And it took KPLC and those in authority quite some time to restore power in the country. Perhaps just starting with you, Didmas, your quick reaction to that. There's been a lot of promises, and not just in terms of dealing with power outages, even the cost of electricity right here in the country. What's your reaction to that?
I think this blackout points to the problem, the bigger problem that we have within the electricity distribution sector in this country. You know, when you have a major feeder, a major line collapses and there is no alternative, therefore this shows that we will not have an alternative route. Just like a road, these feeders, they need to have alternative so that when you have the main feeder line collapsing, you simply divert electricity through an alternative route as you sort out the problem. That is exactly what happens in what we call in engineering circles, closed circuits, where you have both the primary and the secondary feeder lines interconnecting to each other. But some are idle, they don't carry electricity until at a time when the main line has a problem. And this happens to when you are supplying power to major hospitals, even to State House, so that you don't have to inconvenience the Kenyan business people and the Kenyans at large by failure of Kenya Power itself.
Yeah, exactly, and the business people definitely did suffer huge losses over the major power outages. Professor Peter Kagwanja, over to you. I'm pretty sure you're joining Kenyans perhaps in worrying about the frequency of these outages over the last 2 months or so. And it's definitely got Kenyans worked up. I'm pretty sure you saw some of the comments on social media. A quick reaction to that.
Well, I think we need to go back to the basics that we've been talking about. It is important to pay attention to what we are doing. We've seen houses collapsing in some parts of the country. They are very, very tall and they have been built as people are watching. Now we have seen the pylons coming down. It all adds up to one thing. We have the supervisory capacity so that whatever public investment is made, that the quality standards are observed. because it was shocking for many of us to see those things tumbling down, because the wires are wires. So what is the weight that brought them down? And it all adds up to what I'm talking about, the supervisory services during construction. In the past, we have seen roads that are built in January, and by December, they have potholes that can swallow whole giraffes. Why is that? It is because our moral standards, our services have reached a level where people are given contracts, they come quickly, put up things, and then disappear, and the responsibility is left to the public. It's high time we begin paying serious attention to our public investments and what is going into them, what kind of quality service is put there, and is that service able to carry us for a number of years. That is why foreigners have begun displacing local technology, like in road construction. It's almost a given that every road will go to the Chinese, every road will go to the Japanese, or every road will go to the Europeans. Why? Because we no longer pay attention to what we are doing. You put a road and that's it. Just recently we saw in Kathiani, in what you call Mwenge, where a bus plunges into a river, which is a no river. By the way, there was no river there. It was just a big hole which has been there. Why? Because somebody built a bad drift, and the drift cannot enable a bus like that one to go. So it's a general problem we are fighting in power and electricity, and this is a wake-up call that we need to pay attention to the quality of our public investments.
And it's really a wake-up call, Robert Mbui, either way you look at it, because just recently President Uhuru Kenyatta instigated a purge within the Kenya Power Company, and its operations were definitely looked into in terms of the entire power value chain. And this happening right after some of these changes were instigated. Well, what's your reaction, perhaps even as we continue clamoring for cheaper power costs right here in the country?
Yeah, thank you, Rogers. Rogers, I think maybe where you've just ended is where the problem really is. I think it's an issue of personnel, because when it comes to investments that are done in a shoddy manner, obviously it means that some people slept on the job or probably were compromised during the period of construction. So I think maybe the president's decision to purge and get rid of some of that excess force that is not helpful was really the right way to go. And I think other than the fact that Kenyans have lost a lot of money because of the power blackout, I think as a country, the price of power is also extremely high. And we had been promised that the prices would come down, and we are hoping that probably the bills of this month, that we need to start seeing that, because it's difficult to industrialize a nation under the Big Four agenda if we do not have affordable power. So how do we then improve our manufacturing, which is one of the ways by which the government wants to increase and improve the issue of job security, and of course to increase the number of jobs. So I think it's important that we address also the matter of the price of power, and this is the time to do it.
Exactly. As we finalize, Didmas Baraza, should there be a guarantee to investors in terms of reliable power supply, especially to the business operators, in order to help them plan their operations? Because looking at the reactions on social media, and allow me to raise some of the questions that were asked. Why is Kenya Power inconveniencing Kenyans and their businesses? Who is behind the sabotage? This is not acceptable. Yet another question: Kenya Power should compensate consumers for financial losses, equipment damage, physical injuries, and death. So Kenyans are definitely not smiling at such instances, yeah?
I agree with them, and we need to also diversify and demonopolize the supply of electricity in this country, so that private investors can also begin to provide alternative sources of energy. But even as I agree with what Honorable Mbui has said, but I want to differ on the flip side of it, that a purge will never solve problems unless if it's emanating from a root cause analysis that has been done by an expert. What we need for Kenya Power and for any other entity that supplies critical services to Kenyans is a proper
root cause analysis of the cost of power, what should be done to lower the cost of power, what should be done to increase the efficiency, so that the purge should be aimed at implementing the mitigations, or rather the problem that have been identified in the report, but just working up and sending some people packing and reorganizing the farm. It may be, in the long run, a misguided missile in the wrong direction.
Interesting way of putting it, but definitely a lot more details have been covered on page 4 and 5 of the Standard, the Daily Nation back page, equally going big with that on how businesses were counting heavy losses in the power outage. Let's cross over to the front page of the Daily Nation and speak politics just briefly, and I'll start with you, Prof. And that story definitely highlighting the State House race and some of the strategies being applied by the various contenders. Raila Odinga right there and his team mapping out the poll zones across the country in terms of their strongholds, the battlegrounds, and the weak or vulnerable grounds. And perhaps I can ask a personal question. Where do you think Mount Kenya falls in this particular mapping, even as you delve deeper into your thoughts on the process and the preparation so far?
Well, the wheels of democracy have started rolling, and it is very, very clear that various presidential campaigns are putting their houses in order. There is no turning back. 200 days to the elections, and you know, looking at UDA, looking at Azimio, what you see is that people are beginning, the various teams are beginning to put their capacity in place. But the main objective is to catch the vote, and therefore it is basically those areas that are going to be critical in terms of massive voter registration, massive voter turnout, that are going to make a difference. And as you have asked, Mount Kenya is one of those areas. We are talking about 35% of the voting capacity, the voting power of the country, 11 to 12 counties, depending on who is counting. And in that regard, therefore, the battle for Mount Kenya is going to heat up. It was already a big issue towards the end of last year with the Azimio chief, Prime Minister Raila Odinga, saying that he has climbed the mountain. Others say that they climbed the mountain before they now hold the mountain. You cannot go there. So the battle for the soul of Mount Kenya is going to get more intense as we move on. Obviously, within the mountain itself is becoming more of a Tower of Babel than a cohesive political formation. We have seen the largest number of briefcase or individualized parties mushrooming in that region. Some not even tribal. I think in the past we have said parties are tribal. Some actually village parties belonging to very specific people, and what you can call special purpose vehicles, where somebody wants to have a party because they want to be governors, or others want to have parties because they want to be MPs or want to be senators like myself. So in that regard, what we are saying in essence is that Mount Kenya region, Western Kenya, and part of the coast and Lower Eastern are going to be major battlegrounds. And Mount Kenya region, because of the numbers, that 5% of that voting power.
Well, that's interesting. And Prof, still with you, and just briefly, there's been speculation on how Raila Odinga will actually get that 50+1, even these other candidates. But for the Azimio la Umoja movement, it's up to Raila Odinga to retain his traditional strongholds, and this has been perhaps dented by the fact that the One Kenya Alliance is standing strong on their side. What say you about Raila retaining his traditional strongholds while still making inroads in perceived areas like Mount Kenya region, where the likes of Minor Commander on record saying that he needs just 30 to 50% in order to get home safe and dry, as compared to the previous 3 to 5% that he's been getting from this particular region? Will he retain his traditional strongholds?
First and foremost, it is important to put on record that with President Kenyatta not as a candidate in 2022, Prime Minister Raila Odinga is the frontrunner. He had 44.98% in the last election, which was contentious, as you know. And from that point, therefore, the game is how fast to hold that number as it was, which was not based on Mount Kenya, because almost to a man, Mount Kenya had voted for Uhuru Kenyatta. So if you go by that number of 44 point something, we are really saying that Raila Odinga only needs 6%. If you go by that number, slightly above 6%. Now, obviously, what is being argued is that by the handshake and warming up to Mount Kenya, he might have lost certain traditional constituencies outside, within the ones that gave him the kind of vote we are talking about. But remember, he has the weight of the incumbent behind him by virtue of being a handshake partner with the Jubilee.
Okay.
So he already may be having that 6% we talked about. So what Minor Commander is saying, and saying so rightly, is that at this juncture, the horse that is way ahead of the other horses is Raila Odinga, by virtue of that historical analysis of what he has so far. Remember, that number has not changed much. Raila Odinga's competition with with Mwai Kibaki in 2007 also gave him 44.3%. And now Mount Kenya warming up to him is a game changer. Now, what happened is last year by July, somebody was saying that selling Raila Odinga in the Mount Kenya region is like selling pork to Muslims in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. A very comical way of putting it. Can somebody now make that statement? It's not possible to make that statement. Okay. And therefore, by and large, Azimio is slowly breaking into the bastions of UDA, and sooner or later, I think by the time we reach June, the game will have changed.
Okay, Mbui, your camp has been very categorical. It's a 3-horse race. So let's talk about perhaps Raila Odinga's approach, especially in the lower eastern part, using the governors Charity Ngilu, Alfred Mutua, and Kivutha Kibwana. We understand they have a meeting today. You could perhaps delve deeper into that, and perhaps what One Kenya Alliance is doing in order to counter Mr. Odinga on one side and Deputy President William Ruto's influence, especially perhaps within the lower eastern region where you come from.
Yeah, thank you, Rogers. First, Rogers, I will say that One Kenya Alliance as a coalition is looking to even expand and get more partners. So I'll be very careful and guarded with what I say, because some of those players might end up joining us along the way. But having said that, I want to say that the issue of Lower Eastern is, that's a vote block that is under lock and key. And anyone in this country who doesn't understand that is really living in utopia. Because from 2007, every election year, my party leader, His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, has gotten, almost 90% of that vote every single election. In 2007, when he vied for president, in 2013, when he was deputy president for Raila, and in 2017, the same thing happened. So basically, that's a vote block that he controls. Now, our governors, and I think this is also this attitude that Kenyans have, that money will influence things, and they don't understand that there's a lot more than money when it comes to politics. Our governors have come together and have continuously been a pain in the neck. And the real fact is that they don't have the numbers. Now, if you look at the counties of Lower Eastern, the 3 counties, now the leadership at the county level is not just the governor. In fact, there are 5 leaders that you would count at every county that are elected at that level of the whole county. The first one, of course, will be the governor. The senator is also elected at the county level. The women elected at the county level. We have the speakers of the assemblies that are also elected by all MCAs. And then we have the leaders of majority, who are the leaders of the MCAs of the party that has the largest number. Now, out of the 5 leaders that I've talked about, 4 of them in every county in Ukambani are of Wiper Democratic Movement. So clearly, who has the numbers? Majority MPs are from Wiper. Majority MCAs are from Wiper. So I think this idea of the governors seeming to have an ability of saying anything is really a completely false idea. So basically, we have a meeting of the Lower Eastern on Saturday at our party leaders' home, to discuss the agenda for the community. And I think the meeting called today was somehow meant to preempt what the leaders will come and say. In fact, I can say that as the organizing secretary of WIPA, I'm the one who sent out the message of the people that we are expecting in our meeting. And I'll tell you, it was shocking that the meeting for today, they just copied and pasted exactly what I had written. So that means that the agenda is not theirs, but ours. But I don't think they will go far, because I think the community is right behind Kalonzo Musyoka. And also, we still insist on remaining a third force, so that we see if we can find a way to, to neutralize these ethnic and political, there's a lot of bad blood in politics now. Kenyans need to find a leadership that is going to bring sobriety on the table. We've had the kind of things some of the leaders are saying in some of these rallies. We want peace and tranquility for the country, so that the Kenyans can operate in harmony. And then after elections, people can go back to, building the nation as expected of them.
Okay, and perhaps just to quickly ask you, as the organizing secretary, are you expecting these governors to attend your meeting this particular Saturday? Has the invite been extended to them?
Yes, Rogers, they have been invited. The governor of Machakos may be out of the country because he says he's traveling for some reason. The governor of Kitui has expressed that he would be with us. The governor from Makueni has accepted that we can find a common ground, but is a bit uncomfortable coming to that meeting because it is being held in my party leader's home. So I think other than that, we really have no issues. But I don't know about today's meeting, because the real leaders of the region will meet on Saturday. So I don't know which other leaders are meeting today other than the three governors, and what exactly the agenda will be, because it cannot be a community agenda, because for Saturday we've called everyone. The one for today, I can tell you I'm not invited. I don't know why I would not be invited. I am a leader within the community. I'm even a deputy leader in the National Assembly. So if I cannot be invited to that meeting and I belong to that community, it obviously means it's not really a community leaders meeting. But they are all invited to ours on Saturday.
Okay, Didmas, crossing over to you and away from the Lower East, and I'm looking at the newspaper, that particular article I hinted, and they mentioned the strongholds, regions that Mr. Odinga has traditionally enjoyed a lot of support, including Nyanza, Western and Coast, one of these regions you happen to come from, and the Deputy President has been quite busy in terms of his political forays in that region. The CAS, Namwamba joining him most recently. What say you about this particular game plan?
There is something that Professor has said that I want to debunk here. He said that Raila Odinga got 44-point-something% in the last general election, and therefore he only needs 6%. This mathematical allusion is a complete fallacy. I say so because politics has changed. Kenyans vote on a number of factors. One is age. Raila Odinga age has advanced, and I'm sure he will lose quite some substantial amount of votes because of his advanced age. The second influencer is political associations. You understand that the majority of the Kenyans who are associated with Raila Odinga have since moved away from him, and they have vowed not to support him. Just to mention Senator Moses Wetangula of Fort Kenya, just to mention even Kalonzo Musyoka, who have maintained that he will be a stupid person to go back and support Raila Odinga. We also have things to do with, with the time period and his current political associations. Professor has said that because now he's going to enjoy the incumbency, the support of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, and therefore it's going not to be a problem with him. But I want to look at it in different point of view. The incumbency carries itself with a lot of baggage that includes mismanagement of the economy, escalating, increased cost of living for Kenyans. So Kenyans will be able to see that Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta began on a very good footing, but ended on a very wrong one. Just like they say, alianza na roho akamaliza na mwili. So his end term comes with a lot of cries for Kenyans, and I don't think it will add much value, maybe apart from his vote and those of a very few friends that escalate around him. The second thing is that he has alluded to the fact that the phrase of you can't sell Raila Odinga in the mountain no longer holds water. But I want to tell Professor that it still holds water. It holds water because even as much as the country is being made to believe that Uhuru Kenyatta is backing Raila Amolo Odinga, Raila Odinga in his campaign tours of Mount Kenya, he is lonely. Recently he had a meeting in Kabete, not even a single member of parliament from the Kikuyu community accompanied him. Not even a single member of parliament, a single governor. And those governors who are surrounding him at that time have since left him and formed their own political outfits, meaning that they fear associating with Raila Odinga, that when they associate with Raila Odinga and his ODM or his Azimio la Umoja, then they will lose the ground much more further. That's why they are treading very careful. The recent remarks by the Honorable Sabina Chege, who is one of respected leaders in Mount Kenya, tells it all. When he was in Kabete, the person who received him was Babu Owino, Member of Parliament for Embakasi, his constituency, who comes from his community. So the statement that you can't sell Raila Odinga in Mount Kenya still holds water, and I think he has a long way to go insofar as convincing the people of Mount Kenya to vote for him. Now, lastly, which is also very, very important, is that I believe in a school of thought that leaders emerge. And leaders are the one who influences how communities or regions will vote. We have a number of very new leaders who have emerged, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate, and even those who are not necessarily in elective leadership. So I think also those kind of people who have currently now emerged across the country are going to play a pivotal role in influencing the voting direction of this country. It's no longer going to be a preserve of the seasonal and regional kingpins, the so-called like Musalia Mudavadi, like Moses Wetangula. I say so because the last time that Honorable Wycliffe Musalia Mudavadi held a government position that he could have used to change the life of the Kenyan people was around 22 years ago. A child who was 5 years, below 5 years at that time, now they are big people. Okay. They are now going to vote. So I don't think that Musalia Mudavadi will wield much more influence to a certain age of the people like he used to do 10, 15 years ago. So the dynamics have changed. And the professor could be in for a rude shock after voting in the next general election. For example, Western Kenya bolted out of Raila Odinga's hands like 3 years ago. The day he began to mismanage his allies, the day he sacked Wetangula and they replaced him with James Orengo, the day he sacked Cleophas Malala and they replaced him with somebody from Mombasa, he lost the support of Western Kenya long time ago.
But he has front runners, Oparanya pushing his bid in Western Kenya. Would you say he still lost it?
I don't know what you mean by Oparanya being a front runner. Oparanya is not contesting for any position. He is serving his last term. He is struggling in terms of who his preferred successor is. And I know I can't dismiss him. He has some bit of influence. But he will not deliver the votes to Raila Odinga, similar to the number of votes that he got in 2017.
Okay, Prof, hold on to your comments. I know you have the right of reply. We have to take a short break right now. When we come back, of course, we'll continue with the interrogation. Is the support of Uhuru Kenyatta poison chalice, as Didmas sort of hints towards? And perhaps will the wrongs or the lies that were spread within the Mount Kenya region be undone by the team that is pushing Raila Odinga's bid in the Mount Kenya region? We take that short break right now.